What I got for you today is the Marvel Omnibus by David Michelinie, Bob Layton, and John Romita Jr. This is done as a volume one. Not sure. I don't think they've done a volume two yet. I'll check that. Of course, it's Marvel. It's 944 pages. And unfortunately, this one is also out of print. You can find this on the secondhand market easily. They're all over eBay, but they want a pretty penny for them. So this might be something that gets reprinted. I mean, it's pretty popular run. It should. Hopefully it'll get reprinted and you won't have to pay $300 or $250 for one on eBay. Yikes. But you know what? If something is worth $300, it might be this one. But you know me, Marvel guy, and this is my era. So talk about the creators for a little bit. David Michelinie, and I only recently learned how to pronounce that word. So hopefully I'll say it correctly throughout this video. It is Michelinie. Looked it up, found an interview with him on YouTube, and I got it right from the horse's mouth. It is Michelinie. I think in the clip he says it looks French, but it's actually Italian. I believe that's what he said. So hard C, Michelinie. But this writer is known for his runs on Spider-Man. He was the co-creator of Venom and Carnage. He had a lot of good stuff in Avengers. On the Avengers book, he co-created Taskmaster and Ant-Man. And, of course, for me, what I know him from is two celebrated legendary runs on Iron Man. And this book collects the first one. Bob Layton. I could go on about Bob Layton for 30 minutes. I'm not going to do that to you. I mean, I will be doing a Bob Layton video because I have the IDW Signature Series Iron Man by Bob Layton. And I'll get into a lot of detail on him in that video later in the year. But when I think of Bob Layton, I think of maybe one of the greatest inkers that ever was. And a lot of people don't celebrate inkers the way they should, but it makes a huge difference. The wrong inker can make bad pencils even worse. The right inker can elevate some really sketchy pencils to high art. And Bob Layton does that a lot. He's fantastic. And when I think of Bob Layton, I think of his Hercules runs, the two limited series he did in the 80s. That really knocked my socks off and continues to. And he seems to be a great guy. I've chatted with him over email before and on social media, and he seems like a really nice guy too. And that's good to see, because so many of the creators, when you meet them or you hear stories that are not so great. So anyway, he's particularly in my opinion, the greatest Iron Man, specifically Iron Man inker that ever was. He has what I like to call the shiny. I mean, he makes the Iron Man armor look like high polished metal. I mean, it just gleams. You'll see, because I'm going to run tons of the this way, that way. You know where it's going to go, but to my, I'll be running scans of it. And got the cover up here now, and you see the back cover. John Romita Jr., on the other hand, is the penciler for most of this run. And he, of course, is, comic book royalty. His dad, John Romita Sr., was just a phenomenal, legendary figure in Marvel Comics. Starting in 1972 and on into the late 80s, he was the art director for the entire line. He was largely responsible for the look and feel of the character designs, the costumes, and getting the covers correct. In fact, his cover corrections were massive. I mean, he did it all the time. If Stan or someone else on staff thought that the cover face on Conan or not Spider-Man, you can't see his face, but if they didn't look right, he would go in there and change them. He'd just fix it, and usually his fixes improved it. I mean, I've seen a lot of before and afters, especially in some of these collected volumes. They'll show before and how editor rejected it. John Romita Sr. came in, fixed it. But sorry to go on a little tangent there. It's not about him. It's about his son. So John Romita Jr. is probably best known for Well, this run put him on the map, really. This was some of his earliest work at Marvel. John Romita Jr. is known for this run, and he did a great run on Uncanny in the late 80s, I believe. But yeah, he's also, got to say, he's one of those mercurial artists that change and experiment with their look, from era to era. I mean, like the stuff he's doing currently is very, well, the last I seen is from a few years back, but very sketchy kind of style, very light pencils and actually sort of cartoony. But his style has evolved and changed, and I expect it'll change again because he's still not an old guy. He's continuing. He's got a great career, long career. Uh, but I think he's sort of like Frank Miller. And then if you look at like Frank Miller's stuff that he did on Daredevil the first time, looks very, very different than the stuff he did on Batman Dark Knight. And that stuff looks different than on his crime stuff on Sin City and the likes of those. So John Romita Jr. is another one like that, which is in stark contrast to his dad, because John Romita Sr.'s style never really changed. Just straightforward, very realistic, but dynamic. Yeah. So those three, David Michelinie wrote every single issue in this run, and Bob Layton plotted nearly every issue. He's credited as plotter, and he inked the vast majority of them, and he penciled a few too. And that's really good stuff, but you'll see in the scans. And John Romita Jr. penciled the largest bulk of these issues. So this Omni, it collects Iron Man 115 all the way through 157. Doesn't skip anything. Pretty great. Solid run. Some people consider this the greatest single Iron Man run ever. I think that's arguable. It's up there for me. I mean, it's especially up there for me because this is the Iron Man that I was first exposed to as a little kid, and I just loved it. And and every other iteration of the armor to me just sort of pales to this one. I mean, even the movie one, which Iron Man 1 I thought was probably the greatest superhero movie ever. The armor there is still, I think, second to this design. I love it so much. I even got this nice PVC statue. I'll show some shots of it over here. That immortalizes that armor. That's the exact armor that's throughout this run. So this was from 1978 to 1982, 42 issues, and it's a fun ride. It's fantastic. It contains a lot of notable stories, legendary stories that elements were used in a lot of the films and continue to be referenced by people over the years and other writers. Demon in a Bottle, very famous storyline where Tony Stark becomes an alcoholic, and you see all the effects that does to his business and his relationships, and it's done pretty good, especially for the time, considering that a lot of serious social stuff didn't always get featured in superhero comics, but it did here and did really well. I mean, that's directly referenced and used elements of this in the first movie. But yeah, Demon in a Bottle, great stuff, really well done. And probably the other really notable one that's contained in this Omni is Doomquest. And that is the one that really got me. I bought issue 150 of Iron Man off the stands when it was out. And I think Doomquest starts in 149. It runs like a couple issues. And man, it's great. Dr. Doom as Iron Man villain is just perfect because it's armor versus armor. Dr. Doom is sort of a sorcerer and a scientist. He's used both over the years, and you see a lot of the seeds of that planted in this plot. And other writers, especially like in the Fantastic Four, later reference that a lot, that he not only used super science, but he used magic at times. And man, is it good. Of course, it involves time travel, and they go back to King Arthur's Camelot. Morgana Le Fay is featured. I mean, it's so good. The little kid in me just delighted over that, and I still do. I just love it. And the Bob Layton shiny, as I mentioned, is on full display throughout Doomquest. I mean, it's so good. It also Michelinie also introduced a lot of important characters as far as the supporting cast of Iron Man, and they're still many of them are still used today. James Rhodes, Rhodey, eventually becomes War Machine. This is long before War Machine, but you kind of find out his origin in this. You find out that how him and Tony Stark first met, and why they've been friends all these years, and that's explored in here pretty well. It's good. And Bethany Cabe, his girlfriend for a long, long time, the one that helped him through the alcoholism and the Demon in the Bottle, Demon in a Bottle storyline. She's featured here, and this is her first appearance too. The first James Rhodes appearance, the first Bethany Cabe, even Miss Arbogast, his long-suffering executive assistant. She's in it a lot, and she's pretty funny. And Justin Hammer, one of his arch villains that has been used for a long time. It started in this run, and you'll see that. I think he's the character model's modeled after Peter Cushing. It's kind of an ode to him. I believe that's who it was, Peter Cushing. But you'll see. You can, I mean, even if you don't know who that is, you'll see this and you're like, wow, where do I know this from? But yeah, it's Peter Cushing. Yeah, this is a 10-star book for me, for sure. I mean, if it has any flaws, anything I could change, it would be more Bob Layton. I mean, the only flaw for me would be that Bob Layton doesn't ink every single issue. I mean, but yeah, it's super great fun. It's highly recommended. If you want to know where to start with Iron Man and you want some of the historical stuff, not just the more modern stuff, this would be the way to go. I mean, this is Bronze Age, 1978 to 82, I think I said. So it reads a lot easier than the even older stuff. There's really not a lot to say. I mean, the only thing that dates it mainly is the clothing and whatnot. I mean, you can tell that it's 70s, and of course the lack of personal computers and smartphones. I mean, you don't have any of that, so obviously. But yeah, it's great stuff. I mean, if you can snag a copy, or hopefully they reprint it soon, get it. Great stuff. For me, this is the definitive Iron Man. But yeah, I'll be back next Monday, April 4th, and I'm going to try to do a little overview review of that giant Warlock Gallery Edition, Warlock Jim Starlin. Here's the cover, and see you then. Come on back.